This wedding is a fraud. And that man is a criminal busboy? That was the first thing my sister Monica screamed as she kicked open the chapel doors. Not with a bouquet, but with a team of private security. She didn't wait for the music to stop. She marched straight up the aisle, snatched the microphone from the stunned pastor, and pointed a shaking finger at the man I was seconds away from marrying. "I am saving you, Rachel," she announced to the 200 elite guests freezing in their pews. "You are not marrying a businessman. You are marrying the help, and this ceremony ends right now. Before I tell you what I pulled out of my wedding dress pocket to shut her down, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels." I didn't cry. I didn't look at Elijah for reassurance, and I certainly didn't run. In a room full of people holding their breath, waiting for the bride to crumble, I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. Tears are for people who don't have a plan. I walked past the security guards who were hesitating, unsure of who was actually in charge, and took the microphone from Monica's hand. She didn't stop me. She was smiling, waiting for the sob story, waiting for me to beg. She expected the little sister she used to bully. She forgot that I grew up. "You say you're saving me," I said, my voice steady, amplified through the speakers so that not a single person in the back row could miss a syllable. "Just like you saved me 5 years ago when our grandmother died?" Monica's smile faltered, just a fraction. I turned to the crowd. "My name is Rachel. I am 27 years old, and for the last 5 years, I have worked as a forensic accountant for the state prosecutor's office. I track hidden assets for a living, and the woman standing here, my sister, didn't just crash my wedding. She is here to distract you from the fact that 5 years ago, she embezzled $250,000 from my education trust to build her company." A murmur went through the crowd like a physical wave. Monica laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "Oh, please. I borrowed it. I was teaching you resilience. You were too young to handle that kind of money. You stole it," I corrected, my tone clinical. "And you're probably wondering why I never sued you. Why I let you play the successful hotelier while I drove a used sedan and clipped coupons." I took a step closer to her. This was the moment I had rehearsed in the quiet dark of my apartment for half a decade. "I didn't sue you, Monica, because back then, you were broke. A judgment against you would have been worthless paper. So I treated it like a business decision. I treated you like a bad investment that just needed time to mature." I looked her dead in the eye. "The trust fund you raided had a clause you never bothered to read because you were too busy spending the principal. It's called a convertible note. It means that if the unauthorized withdrawal isn't repaid within 5 years, the debt doesn't disappear. It converts. It accumulates compound interest at a punitive rate, secured against the borrower's future assets." I saw Marcus, her husband, stiffen in the front row. He knew what those words meant. I calculated the date. "Monica, I watched your little motel chain grow. I watched you buy your house. And I waited. I waited for the interest to compound until the debt was worth more than everything you own. I didn't invite you here to witness my marriage. I invited you here because today, exactly at noon, the note matured. I'm not the victim you stole from anymore. I'm the creditor who has come to collect. You might think I'm heartless. You might look at a woman destroying her own sister on her wedding day and see a monster. But you didn't see the last 5 years. You didn't see the grout I scrubbed or the floors I polished while Monica built her reputation as a hospitality genius. I wasn't just her sister. I was her overhead reduction strategy. 3 years ago, on the opening night of her flagship Luxe Stay Motel, the ice machine broke an hour before the investors arrived. Monica didn't call a repairman. She called me. I was in the middle of studying for my CPA exam, but she threatened to tell our parents I was abandoning the family business. So I went. I spent 4 hours on my knees in a utility closet, ankle deep in freezing water, fixing a compressor she was too cheap to service. When I finally walked out, soaked and shivering, I ran right into Monica, giving a tour to a group of venture capitalists. She didn't introduce me. She didn't thank me. She laughed, clinking her champagne flute against a glass, and said, "Ignore the mess. Good help is so hard to find these days, isn't it?" They laughed. She laughed. And I stood there, dripping dirty water onto the cheap carpet she'd bought with my college fund. And I realized something. She didn't see me as a person. She saw me as an appliance. Something to be used until it broke, then replaced. But nothing compared to how they treated Elijah. When we first started dating, I brought him to a family dinner. Marcus, Monica's husband, was holding court at the head of the table, bragging about his vendor contract with Vantage Collective. He didn't know Elijah was the chairman of Vantage. He only saw the clothes Elijah wore. Simple, practical, unbranded. He saw a man who worked with his hands. When Elijah stood up to help clear the table, Marcus didn't say thank you. He snapped his fingers. "Boy," he said, not even looking up from his phone. While you're up, refill this. And try not to spill it like you did last time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and show them exactly who was serving them. But Elijah just caught my eye. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. He poured the wine with perfect grace, the kind you only learn from a lifetime of service, and sat back down. Later that night, I asked him why he let them treat him like that. He kissed my forehead and said, "Because when a man shows you who he is, you should let him finish the performance." They thought they were breaking us. They thought every insult, every unpaid shift, every sneer was putting us in our place. They didn't know they were just giving us ammunition. Every time Monica called me the help, I added another % to the mental interest rate. Every time Marcus snapped his fingers at Elijah, he was signing his own severance package. They fed their egos, and in doing so, they starved their future. Monica didn't even look at the document. She didn't flinch at the numbers or the legal weight of what I had just said. She just rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it was almost impressive in its stupidity. She turned to the crowd, spreading her arms wide as if inviting them to share in the joke. "You really are pathetic, Rachel," she scoffed, her voice dripping with condescension. "You think you can walk into my venue, on the day I'm hosting the most important event of the season, and threaten me with some imaginary debt? I built Luxstay from the ground up. I have lawyers who eat little accountants like you for breakfast." She stepped closer, invading my personal space, her perfume cloying and heavy. "You don't own me. You don't own anything. You're just jealous because I took the money you were too scared to use and turned it into an empire." Marcus stepped up beside her, adjusting his silk tie with the arrogance of a man who believes his own press releases. He looked at Elijah with a sneer that was meant to be withering. "And you?" he spat. "I don't know how you got past the gate, but you're done. Do you know who I am? I run the logistics for this entire region. I have friends in every boardroom in the state. By tomorrow morning, your name will be mud. You won't be able to get a job scrubbing toilets in a gas station, let alone in a respectable establishment." He turned to the security team. 4 men standing like statues near the altar. "Get this trash out of here," Marcus barked, snapping his fingers again. "Drag them out. And if they resist, feel free to get creative. I'll cover the legal fees." The audacity was breathtaking. They truly believed they were untouchable. They believed that their titles, their leased cars, and their borrowed status made them gods in this room. They looked at us and saw only what they wanted to see. A jealous sister and a servant. They were so blinded by their own reflection that they couldn't see the cliff edge they were standing on. "You're making a mistake, Monica," I said, my voice low and even. "I'm giving you one last chance to walk away with your dignity. Acknowledge the debt. Acknowledge the theft. And maybe I won't take everything." "Get them out!" Monica screamed, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the hysteria underneath. "Now! Throw them in the street!" I looked at Elijah. He hadn't moved. He hadn't flinched at Marcus's threats or Monica's screaming. He just watched them with a detached curiosity, like a scientist observing a particularly aggressive strain of bacteria under a microscope. They were screaming orders, demanding violence, fully expecting the world to bend to their will because it always had. They didn't realize that the world had shifted beneath their feet 5 minutes ago. They were shouting commands at an army that didn't belong to them. The security team didn't move. Monica's command hung in the air, breathless and sharp. But the 4 men she thought she commanded stood like granite. They didn't look at her. They didn't look at Marcus. Their eyes were fixed on a point just behind my shoulder. "Did you hear me?" Monica shrieked, her voice cracking into a register that made the guests wince. "I am the client. I am paying you. Remove these trespassers immediately." The lead security officer, a man with shoulders the width of a doorframe, finally moved. But he didn't step toward me. He walked past Monica as if she were a ghost. He stopped 3 feet in front of Elijah, snapped his heels together, and bowed his head. A distinct, respectful nod that you only give to one person in the room. "Mr. Chairman," the guard said, his voice deep and deferential. "Do you require assistance?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a lung. Monica froze, her arm still extended, pointing at the door. Marcus blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. "Chairman?" Monica whispered, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "Chairman of what?" Elijah stepped forward. He didn't fix his tie. He didn't check his phone. He just stood there, radiating the kind of quiet power that doesn't need to shout to be heard. He looked at the vaulted ceiling, then down at the marble floor, and finally at my sister. "Chairman of Vantage Collective," Elijah said softly. "The holding company that owns the Rivera Group. The company that owns the hotel you stayed in last night. And the company that owns this estate." He took a step toward her. "You didn't rent this venue, Monica. My assistant cleared the schedule because I wanted to marry Rachel in the place where my grandfather taught me how to read a profit and loss statement. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. I saw the realization hitting the guests in waves. The hushed whispers, the hands covering mouths. They weren't looking at a busboy anymore. They were looking at the man who signed their paychecks. Or at least, the man who owned the buildings they worked in. Elijah turned his gaze to Marcus. The arrogance was gone from Marcus's face, replaced by a sickly, gray pallor. He knew. He knew exactly what Vantage Collective was. He knew because his logistics company relied on Vantage for 80% of its revenue. Marcus, Elijah said, his tone conversational, almost bored. You mentioned earlier that you run logistics for the region. That implies you have a contract with us. Sir, Marcus stammered, sweat beading instantly on his forehead. Sir, I didn't know. It was a joke. We were just... Section 9, Paragraph C. Elijah interrupted. The moral turpitude clause. It allows Vantage to unilaterally terminate any vendor contract if the vendor engages in public harassment, slander, or behavior that damages the brand's reputation. Elijah didn't pull out a phone. He didn't call a lawyer. He just looked at the head of security. Logged the time. 12:14 p.m. The contract is terminated effective immediately. No. Marcus lunged forward, panic overriding his senses. You can't do that. That contract is $5 million. It's my entire business. It was your business. Elijah corrected. Now it's a vacancy. Marcus looked at his phone as if hoping for a reprieve. But we all knew what was happening. Emails were flying. Algorithms were executing. The stock of his life was crashing in real time. He looked at Monica, not with love, but with terror. They had built their entire identity on the illusion of superiority, on the belief that they were the masters of the universe. In 30 seconds, Elijah had evicted them from their own lives without lifting a finger. Now, Elijah said, turning back to the guard, please escort the guests to the reception area. My wife and I have some business to finish with her sister. Monica watched her husband collapse in a heap of debt and unemployment, but she didn't rush to comfort him. She didn't even look at him. She stepped over his legs to get to me. Her face was a rictus of pure, unadulterated hate, but her eyes held a frantic desperation. She was losing control, and for a narcissist, that is a fate worse than death. You think this scares me? She screamed, her voice shrill enough to crack glass. So what if Marcus is fired? I don't need him. I don't need any of you. I have Luxstay. I built that company from nothing. It is worth millions. And it is mine. She pounded her chest with a fist, the jewelry I had inadvertently paid for rattling against her collarbone. You can't touch my company, Rachel. You are nothing but a glorified calculator. I am a CEO. I didn't shout back. I didn't need to. I simply reached into the pocket of my gown and pulled out a single, folded sheet of paper. It wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't a threat. It was a notification of transfer. You're right, Monica, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria like a scalpel. Luxstay is worth millions. Or at least, the real estate portfolio is, which is why it was such excellent collateral. I held the paper up. Remember that convertible note? The one you signed 5 years ago because you were too arrogant to read the terms? You assumed I would never call the debt. You assumed I was too weak, but the contract had a default clause. If the principal plus interest wasn't repaid by the 5-year maturity date, which was today at noon, the debt doesn't go to collections. I took a step closer, watching the blood drain from her face. It automatically converts into equity at a predetermined valuation. A valuation based on your initial, zero-revenue startup. What does that mean? She whispered. Her hands shaking so hard she looked like she was vibrating. I kept my voice steady. The math is simple. With 5 years of punitive interest, the debt you owe exceeds your company's total value. The conversion triggered at 12:1. I let the words sink in. I don't just hold your debt, Monica. I own Luxstay every bank account, every asset, including the house you're living in. You listed it as corporate property. Your mistake. Her reaction wasn't shock, it was collapse. Monica's face flushed purple, her neck vein bulging. Then she erupted, ripping off her necklace, screaming denial and insults, insisting she was the master and I was the servant. Not anymore, I said. You are trespassing on corporate property. Leave. I turned away, assuming she was finished. I underestimated her. A bottle scraped. A feral scream. She charged with a magnum of champagne raised like a weapon. Security hit her mid-swing, snapped her wrist, and pinned her to the floor. Still, she howled, claiming she made me, that her cruelty was mentorship, twisting theft into credit. I stood over her. Calm. You didn't build me. You taught me I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. You weren't a mentor. You were the damage I finally repaired. I ordered the guards to remove her, and walked into a life she had no part in. 10 months later, she was unrecognizable, broke, abandoned, begging for work at one of my restaurants. Not a mansion, just a brownstone, and a thriving business I ran with Elijah. The takeover had exposed years of fraud. She and Marcus lost everything. Now she stood in my kitchen, scattered, clutching a damp resume. Please, she whispered. Just a loan. Instead, I handed her an apron. No handouts. Dishwasher. $12 an hour and a hot meal. She stared. Waited for humiliation. None came. You said you made me, I said. Now it's your turn. She tied the apron and started washing dishes, tears dripping into the sink but working maybe for the first time. I left her to it. The cycle was broken. She wasn't my rival anymore, just another person earning her way.